My name is Brittany Wright, and I have been a dispatcher for 5 years, 3 years with the state police. The time that we can get good out of what we do is usually a favorite, regardless of what kind of call it is or anything like that. Anytime you end up hanging up a call and a good outcome happened, it's a good thing. I've always had a passion for helping people. I always liked giving back. I grew up in a law enforcement family, so I've always had a passion for wanting to help people, and 911 was my way of doing that. There are two that stick out the most in my mind. The first one was an overdose call that I got, that a woman was driving down the road, her kid was a passenger, and she had actually shot up some heroin while they were on their way back from a store. The little girl was probably 10, had no idea where they were at, just knew they were coming back from the store. She thought they were on their way home. And unfortunately, that day, as I tried to figure out where she was at with our equipment, it wasn't coordinating correctly, so I couldn't figure out where she was at. So I had to choose between having her stay and help her mom, or having her run around and find an address, a mailbox, a license plate, something that could help me figure out where they were at so I could get help to them. Luckily, she was able to do that, and we were able to get help to her, and her mom ended up living. That was one that I was really proud of. And then I'd say my second one was the first shooting that I worked. One of the first shootings that I worked. The very first one that I did was a domestic violence call. We were going to arrest the husband, and we ended up getting in pursuit with him. Luckily, that day I had asked the wife if he'd had any weapons on him, and she had told me yes. My troopers were aware of that, and after he fled in his vehicle, he wrecked, got out on foot, and went over a ridge line and was there waiting for our troopers to come over the ridge line. And when they did, he opened fire on them, and they actually shot him. So them coming out from that alive, I was very proud of, because that was something that could have been extremely bad. Yes, there is one that has stuck with me since the day that it happened, which a lot of people don't seem to realize, is that just because we weren't there, we didn't see it on scene, doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us. Stuff that we hear, usually by the time a responder gets there, we've been able to calm them down enough that they're still distraught, but not as bad. When we get them, we deal with people on their worst day of their lives. Every call for 911. And I remember it was last year, the year before that, it was in the summer, and a husband and wife, they were going to take their boat out on the lake. Well, as they were putting the boat in, the wife was backing the boat in at the ramp. She was on the boat, putting it into the water, and the husband failed to put their boat plug in. Well, instead of them getting the boat out of the water, letting it drain out, and then putting the plug in, he decided he was going to take the plug and swim under the boat to try to stop it. It came down on top of him, and he drowned. Luckily, we did have Fish and Wildlife units on the lake at the time, so they were there within seconds. But then we had to get a rescue team, we had to get a dive team to them, and I knew how long it took them to get there and to figure out how to get into the water, that it wasn't going to be a good outcome no matter what I did. And after I had hung up with callers, I took another 911 call, and it was his wife, and she literally stood there and watched him drown and screamed in my ear, and there was nothing I could do to help her. I knew there was nothing I could do, except there's nothing I could say to her to comfort her. There was no way I was going to be able to calm her down, and she just screamed in my ears for about 10 minutes, and all I could do was tell her, you're just going to have to let them work. There's nothing you can do but let them work, knowing he wasn't going to make it. So I've come to realize really quickly that people no longer know how to use 911 properly. There's either things that they don't realize they can call 911 for, or they will call 911 thinking that it is an emergency, and it's not. We will have calls, anything from, can you tell me what the roads are like right now? Can I drive across the state knowing that it's 3 feet of snow outside. Everybody's been told to stay home and they're calling 911 for that. To there's a deer in my backyard. What do I do? I've had people call 911 for I've hit a possum. I need to help it. That's not what 911's for. They get upset. So yeah, there are some things that 911 is not for. You know, anytime you have a life or death situation, anytime you don't know where you're at and you need to call something in, you can use 911 for that. A lot of people don't realize that that is an okay thing. Reckless driving complaints. If you ever get behind somebody that you think is under the influence, they have now put not only themselves but other drivers at risk, and that is okay for you to call 911 for. You will ring into your closest police department. It is okay for that. If you have a situation, like I said, that you don't know where you're at, 911 will make you go to your closest police department regardless of where you live. I could be in California and have a problem and call, and I will ring into my police department there. We are a family. We depend on each other a lot. You end up becoming very close with the people that you work with. We spend 10, 12 hours a day with the same people, a lot of times in the same room, or the same people on the road on the same shift. I work a lot of times with the same troopers every day, the same deputies. So humor helps. You kind of learn to train yourself. Unfortunately, in our line of work, we don't have time to dwell on things that have happened. The day that drowning occurred, I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had to forget it, move on, and go to the next call. You just have to learn to separate the two.